What made Soundgarden's Badmotorfinger such a great album? Was it the odd time signatures, the alternate tunings? Was it Chris Cornell? Or was it inclusion of the new bass player? Today I'm talking about Badmotorfinger by Soundgarden, released on October 8th, 1991. Many fans think it's their best album. So before I begin, let me know in the comments if you think this is their best album, or is it something different like Super Unknown, or is it one of the others? Maybe you prefer one of the earlier ones or one of the ones after this. So let's talk about this album. It's their third studio album, the first to feature bass player Ben Shepherd, who this guy I believe is, and he solidified the classic lineup of the 90s. Now, why is this an important album? That's what I'm going to talk about in the video. But before I do any of that, let's take a look at my vinyl record, which I filmed separately, and then I'll come back and talk about the story. Let's take a look at the vinyl record. Let me get closer. So here is the logo and the design. Pretty cool. On the other side, it has the four members, where you have Ben Shepherd is the new member during this time. Here are the song titles, and it has the producer and all the people who worked on it. I will be talking about that all in this video. And here is the black vinyl. Let's get a little closer to that. So it has the song titles, the A&M Records logo, and the sticker. So let's flip it over. Okay, same thing here. This is actually side one. I showed you side two first, but here are the song titles and the same thing. Let's get back to the video. So let's start in the beginning. Back in 1990, Jason Everman, the bass player for Soundgarden, left the band. They needed a new bass player, and they found Ben Shepherd. But what's interesting was that this was not his first time he auditioned for the band. His first time was back in 1989 when original bassist Hiro Yamamoto left the band. But back then he was more of a guitar player and the band turned him down. He didn't know how to play the songs well enough on the bass. But the band liked him nonetheless, so when Jason Everman was fired after the Louder Than Love tour in 1990, Soundgarden contacted Ben Shepherd again, and he landed the gig. Ben Shepherd was also a longtime fan of the band, so that helped him get the job. Now time for them to record the album. Soundgarden entered the studio in the spring of 1991. They recorded the album in a few different locations. They did the initial tracking at Studio D in Sausalito, California. They also worked at Bear Creek Studios in Woodinville, Washington, which was in their home state. And they worked at A&M Studios in Los Angeles, California. The album was mixed at Can-Am Studios in Tarzana, California, and mastered at Masterdisc in New York City. And by the way, if you've ever wondered how they got the name Soundgarden, I found a clip of these guys talking about it. So let me show that to you.
Metal tubing put in the ground to capture the sounds of the wind.
We're not actually named, there's a sculpture in Seattle. We're not actually named after the sculpture. We liked the name of the sculpture, and we thought that it evoked other images besides just a metal sound sculpture for us.
Yeah, besides
an appropriate name.
It had.
But back to Badmotorfinger, it was produced by Terry Date. He also produced the previous album, Louder Than Love. Not only that, the band itself were also credited as producers. So they took more of a hands-on approach instead of just relying on the opinions of one person. The album was mixed by Ron St. Germain, who gave the album a very distinct sound. For example, he gave the drums a very dry sound, and he turned up the bass a lot, and that gave it a very unique sound. The album was also mastered by Howie Weinberg. As for the songwriting, it was a collaborative approach. Now that Ben Shepherd was in the band, he was able to work with the other members, who were Chris Cornell, Kim Thayil, and Matt Cameron. Again, let me show you these guys on the photo here. The band wanted to capture the live energy of the studio instead of going for a more polished sound. The studio at Studio D in Sausalito was described as a one-room studio, which had one big live room and a couple of isolated booths. Matt Cameron's drums were in the middle of the room, and Kim Thayil and Ben Shepherd were in the same room, but their amps were in separate, isolated booths. Chris Cornell recorded his vocals in the control room, as he had a very powerful voice, and they didn't want his vocals to be kind of mixed in or bleed into the drums microphones. They also decided to experiment with alternative tunings and odd time signatures. So the next part of the video is going to get a little technical, but I'm going to explain it in a way so that hopefully everyone can understand me. Let's start with the odd time signatures. It became a thing that gave the album a unique sound. It helped push the boundaries of heavy music. I remember reading about this in some magazine back in 1991. Back then I was learning how to play the guitar, and I was trying to play some of these songs, and I had one of those tab books for this album. This was before the internet, so we didn't have those like websites with the tabs. We had to like buy books. But anyway, the person behind these unconventional tunings was Thayil. That was his thing. While some bands may have used one or two drop tunings, Kim tried to push the envelope with these different tunings. For example, one of the tunings used on the album is called drop B. This means the lowest E string is dropped all the way down to a B, and the other strings are tuned to match the sound of the low B string, which in turn gives the guitar a very heavy sound. This was used in songs like Rusty Cage, Searching with My Good Eye Closed, and Holy Water. These songs had some really thick and crunchy guitar riffs. Then there was drop D tuning, which is something that was more common in rock music. In this tuning, you just tune the low E string down to a D and the rest is in standard. Makes it easy to play power chords with just one finger, and it was used for songs like Outshine, Praise the Bulldozers, Jesus Christ Pose, and Room 1,000 Years Wide. But then there were a few weird tunings. For example, one tuning called DAD GB flat E used on the track Face Pollution. It gave the song a different feel and made it easier to add harmonics. There was a tuning called EEEEEE, or all strings tuned to different octaves of E, that gave the guitar this percussive sound, and used in Mind Riot. Another tuning called EEBBBE, which used open B strings in the middle of the guitar, and that kind of like gave the guitar more of this like ringing sound, and that was used on the track Somewhere. Then there were odd time signatures. This was something that was common in progressive rock, especially in the 70s, but in the 80s most of the heavy music was standard tuning, or maybe a step down or half a step down. But this band liked to use odd time signatures. One example of the track Outshined. So for example, the verses used a 7/4 time signature, but they transitioned between this and a common 4/4 time signature. Face Pollution used a 9/8 time signature, and this gave the song a frantic and driving energy. On Mind Riot, Matt Cameron played a 6/8 loop over a 4/4 tempo and gave it more of a polyrhythmic effect. All of these odd time signatures gave the album a very unique sound, as most rock bands mostly use standard 4/4 time signature, but this band was not great just by the guitars and bass and drums. There was one other factor that really made this a great album and a great band, and I'm talking about Chris Cornell. He was a powerful vocalist. His vocals were used to the fullest on this album. He used his full power, range, and emotional depth in a way that perfectly complemented Soundgarden's evolving sound. Let's start with the power in his voice. He had this multi-octave vocal range and was able to seamlessly transition between low gutturals to high shrieks, often within the same phase. For example, he was able to reach these high notes, such as going up to an A5 in Face Pollution and a G♯5 in Jesus Christ Pose. Not only that, but his vocals were filled with emotion. He could express the idea of existential dread on tracks like Outshined and the line, Looking California, Feeling Minnesota, or express defiance in Jesus Christ Pose, or the intensity of Rusty Cage. These were not just loud, they were expressions of anger, frustration, and vulnerability. Not only that, he was able to keep up with these odd time signatures and weird tunings in a way that made it sound natural. Not only that, but he was the original drummer for the band back when the band first started, and that helped him keep up with all these changing drum patterns. He also had a very recognizable voice that could go from the blues to metal. He used more of a lower register on Badmotorfinger compared to some of his earlier recordings. This added a layer of depth that only few vocalists could match. He also displayed incredible dynamic control. He could pull back for more introspective moments before belting out more of his high notes. As a result, The album never sounded monotonous. There was so much variety in his vocals. Finally, he was able to match the feeling and emotion of the lyrics that were being sung, something not every vocalist is able to master. So that is all. Let me know, what do you think of Soundgarden Badmotorfinger? Is it their best album? Check out this video I did right here on Stone Temple Pilots, another big grunge band from the 90s. Please give this video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do content related to physical media on this channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.